Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. But today we want you fired up about my guest. I will be speaking with author Corinne Snyder, and we're talking about her book, Nobody But God, Testimonies of Faith, Hope, and Power During the COVID-19 Pandemic. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do? Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, hello. Welcome, Corinne, to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, Dr. Chester. God bless you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, as is tradition around here, we always give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps those few people out there that may not be familiar with you or your work. So my first question for you is, what makes you you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a retired registered nurse and high school health teacher. I am married with 2 daughters and 2 grandsons, but more important, I'm a child of God who loves the Lord, and I've been walking this way a long time. I'm a member of the Holy Tabernacle Church of Boston, Massachusetts, where Bishop Dr. Arthur F. Jack is my pastor, and I stand on Romans 8:39. I would let nothing separate me from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord.
I love it. Now, being an author, is that something that you have always wanted to do, or did you find that life presented you with this opportunity and you said yes?
Well, I never thought that I would be an author. So I would say that life presented me with this opportunity, but more to the point, the Lord presented me with this opportunity.
Now, the title of your book, Nobody But God, Testimonies of Faith, Hope, and Power During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Why did you feel that this was the appropriate title for your work?
Well, first of all, the Lord inspired me after looking at watching a virtual women's conference for women to write their stories about how God brought them through this pandemic. And so with people losing their jobs, with children having to be schooled from home, it was nobody but God that brought them through this time, a time which we have never seen before. This pandemic was worldwide, and so many lives were affected. There was a lot of doubt and uncertainty, and there was fear and anxiety, not knowing what was going to happen. People were sick. People were dying. And so it was nobody but God that brought us through this pandemic.
Now, as far as the ideal reader is concerned, I know that for many authors, they write a book, and there's a target audience, if you will, when they're writing. They may be perhaps thinking about working mothers or caretakers, and they want to make sure that they include certain nuggets of wisdom for that target audience. When you were writing, did you have a particular age group that you were thinking about, or is this book appropriate for all ages who are interested in looking at a copy?
This book is for all ages. God doesn't limit himself to a particular age. When God operates, when God does his miracles, when God shows his power, he shows it to everybody, man, woman, boy, or girl, from a child to an adult. So it's for all ages.
Now, as far as the way in which we should read your book to make sure that we are utilizing it properly, did you write it in a way in which we should read it from cover to cover, literally meaning page after page? Should we do it more so chapter by chapter or section by section, or more like a devotional? Read a few pages, put it down, digest the information before you move on to the rest of the book. What's your suggestion there?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that in reading it, if you read it one page at a time, or even read it as a devotional, one woman who read the book decided to read it a page at a time. And so with each testimony, she read it and meditated on it for that particular day. And I think that I really don't have a specific suggestion, but you could read it as a devotional daily, or you can read it by sections, because the book is divided in sections of faith and of healing and of provision and thankfulness. So you can't even read it in sections. There may be a day in which you feel low and you're looking for hope. Well, there are a few testimonies that are in the section of hope. So I may not have a specific suggestion in how you could read the book, but there are 2 or 3 different ways in which you can do it.
But I think that you've given us permission to kind of reader's choice. You can do it, every day, a little bit every day. You can do it as needed. I think that's wonderful that you have the permissions to read it what's most appropriate for you in that day. And like you said, you might be low, or you might need to even inspire someone else, and you can go to a section and read something and perhaps share with a friend or a loved one, because it is broken down in those sections. So I love the fact that you have done that. Now, when it comes to the overall theme of the book, I don't want to assume, so I want to make sure that I ask that question of you, and that is, what is the overarching theme that you want for the readers to understand, having read Nobody But God?
I believe the overall theme is to let everyone know that you have a story, and that as Christians, you should tell everyone what God has done for you. And not only in telling people what God has done for you will help you, but it will help and inspire others. With this time that we're in right now, a lot of people were down and depressed and thought the world looked dark. But we who know God, we are, to shine the light and to let others know that you can put your faith and trust in God. And this is what God did for me. Let me tell you what he did for me. And I think that is more of the overarching theme.
Speaking of, let me tell you what God has done for me. That is a great segue to my next question for you. Thank you so much for that. And that is, how were the women motivated to write their testimonies? What was their reaction? How did they feel in being able to share such a moment with those who would read the book?
Well, most of them said, "Whoa, okay, but I'm not sure. I'm not used to writing." But that's another question. But a lot of them wanted to share their story. A lot of them wanted to just express what God had done for them. and that in spite of what was going on, God took care of them. God was taking care of them. God was healing them. God was, just putting things together for them, even though it might not have looked that way. Mm-hmm. So I think with the motivation, they were motivated, but there were some challenges.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And speaking of challenges, what were those challenges?
Well, most of us, especially in the Pentecostal church, when we say a testimony, we say it, we speak it. So for some of the women, the challenge was actually writing it, putting it down on paper. Some people have a fear of, did I spell the word right, or do I have the comma in the right place? But I encouraged them. I said, don't even think of that as a challenge, because I'm right here to help you with that. Some people were not, totally computer literate, and so some people actually use their smartphones to text their stories, while others even called me on the phone. And there were even some that hand wrote it, and even put it in the mail, because we were still in quarantine at that time.
Mm-hmm. As you were talking, I was thinking, thank God for technology, because we do now have the speak to text option where we can, just record and it will write it out. Of course, you need to proofread and edit it, but for some people, they are much more verbal in their expression, and you are right about that. Now, I want to ask you, because someone may be having this question, because I try to ask as many questions that I think that my listeners may be curious about as well. And you said in the Pentecostal church that testimonies are something that is most often spoken. And I want to, is that something where it is not looked at as being as valid, or is it not as appropriate to write it, that it is something that needs to be spoken into the atmosphere as God spoke creation? What can you give us a little bit of more context? Why is it important to speak your testimony?
Well, I think in speaking it, as people see, they see the person, but the real important thing is the power of God. The power of God can be felt whether it's spoken or whether it's being read. If the power of God is there, you can read the words and you will feel His presence. And certainly when you speak the words, if the Lord is present in those words, then you will feel His presence there. But
Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much for that clarification, because I could just feel that someone's going, oh, wait a minute, does that mean I need to? And it's like, let's make sure for that person who's a little more curious and wants to make sure that they are presenting their testimony the correct or most proper way. So thank you for that clarification there. Well, it is time for us to go to break, but before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay. The title of the book is Nobody But God, Testimonies of Faith, Hope, and Power During the COVID-19 Pandemic. The books can be purchased on online, Trafford Publishing, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. And to get in touch with me, my email address is csnyder878@gmail.com. That's CSNYDER878@gmail.com.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Corinne Snyder, and we are talking about her book, Nobody But God, Testimonies of Faith, Hope, and Power During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Now, Corinne, my next question for you is about positive experiences. I think you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, that unfortunately for so many during especially the early stages of COVID, there was a lot of doom and gloom. There was a darkness that kind of just fell over everyone, learning how to maneuver during such a period. But what positive experiences were the ladies able to express when they were sharing their testimonies?
Well, in terms of positive experiences, most of them said that their walk with God strengthened, their prayer life increased. One of the ladies had a business in which the business had flourished more than ever. People were healed during this time, and there were people who had deaths, and their grief was, dealt with. God had lifted some of their burdens. Family relations were strengthened. So even in the midst of this pandemic, there was a lot of positive that came from it. And it was only because God was there working things out on their behalf.
I would comment so many times and say, if we have to be in a state of lockdown or we're being quarantined, use this time to get to know your family. We are so used to the hustle and bustle, right? So find out what's going on with your kids. Where are they and what are they doing? What's going on in their lives. You may have forgotten that you had a spouse that you hadn't talked to, except for at dinner time, right? So it's like spend time with them. But, more importantly, and you talked about this as well, to spend time with God. This is a great time for us to have family worship or to be introduced to a song that maybe your kids like that you had no idea was on the radio, right? And it's like it's a time to really put those bonds together. You are so right there. Now, speaking of that type of development, was there a support system that you found that you needed or made themselves available when you were during the writing process, be it that it was spiritual support or it was to help boost your morale, or just that friend that may have called and checked on you and said, are you doing okay? Do you need some coffee or tea? Did you find that you had that support team there as well?
Well, first I would say that the spiritual support, there were 4 women who on a weekly basis not only prayed for me, but prayed for the book, prayed that God's glory would be shown in the book, prayed that the book would go worldwide, and prayed that the women writing their testimonies would, continue serving God in a real way. Moral support. There were 2 other women that had helped with in the editing and assisting me, and of course my own pastor and Bishop Jack and his wife First Lady Jack, and the Women's Ministry president. They were all there to support me along the way.
And it is so important to have those people around you, and boy, does prayer work. I cannot tell you how many times I knew that I was supported simply because I had some prayer warriors on my side. So absolutely. Now, for many of the authors that I talk to, there is something that they hope or wish to accomplish in making their book available to the masses. Not necessarily that that financial goal, but there's something else that they want to do. They want to share an idea, or they want to give someone spiritual freedom, or allow people to join them on a journey of imagination. What was the one thing that you hoped to accomplish by sharing your book with the masses?
I think the one or the major thing that I wanted to accomplish is to let people know that you can tell your story. Don't be afraid to let others know about the power of God in your life. Don't be afraid, and it's important to let others know what God has done for you, and praying that the story that you share will have an impact on someone's life. And this was really about ordinary women doing extraordinary things through the power of God by sharing their story.
Oh, I love that answer. Now, in years past, I would have asked this question a little bit differently of what type of feedback have you gotten? But we're coming out of a pandemic, and that meant that the book expos were not as available. Book signings didn't happen the way that we wanted them to, so on and so forth. So with that being said, have you been able to get any feedback from anyone who's had the opportunity to purchase your book? Have they been able to send emails or at least contact you virtually?
Yes, I have gotten a few emails. As I had mentioned earlier, one reader said that she started to read the book as a devotional. Another person said, "Oh, it was quick reading. I just couldn't put the book down." Another person had said that she felt like she almost knew the writer, and that, the writer was like right in their living room. They were able to relate to what that person had to say to them. And,
I like that.
And some others were just amazed at the testimonies. Even me myself, these women go to my church. They go to Holy Tabernacle Church, and so I know all of them. And so I felt that I was right there with them as God was working with them, as God was, performing the miracle within their life. It was like their stories were unfolding, their testimonies that unfolded before me, because I knew them and I was, there with them. So I know God is real. I know God is real.
Absolutely. And it's nothing like that positive feedback. And I like how that person says it felt as though they were right here with me. That is such a powerful experience, and especially when the story hits home for you, or it inspires you to say, you know what, let me lift my hand in praise as well. So I love that person had that experience. That's awesome. Now, speaking of being encouraged, many of the authors that I've had an opportunity to talk with, they will say that while they were writing, they themselves were inspired or motivated, or they felt as though their relationship with God even strengthened, because they understood that though they may have been writing, this was a God-inspired moment. This was a God-inspired book, and it was bigger than just themselves. So I want to ask you that question as well. Do you feel that this book encouraged you in any way?
Yes, certainly I was encouraged by just seeing the women grow. And I was encouraged by more of the community or sisterhood that was even more formed because we were all going through this together. And yes, again, I was encouraged because we don't know what God sometimes is doing in our lives. And certainly He does all things well, and He does things exceedingly and abundantly, whatever you can ask or think. This was never, quote, quote, on my agenda, but God knows all things. And so I guess I can say I'm encouraged with what might be happening next in my life.
I love it. I love it. Now, I want to ask this question. I always like to ask a question that's for our aspiring authors out there because they are one of the biggest group that really take the time to go to the website and send me an email or go to our contact tab and send us some positive responses. So I want to ask you about when it was time to publish the book, you make the determination of how you would get the book to the masses. Did you decide to self-publish or use a publishing house?
I decided to use a publishing house because there was a woman in our church who had published 2 books. So I spoke to her and ended up using the company that she used.
And see, this is why I ask those questions, because that's going to inspire someone to help in making their determination. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Corinne, and spending some time with us here today. I think that you have definitely inspired someone and given them a new book to definitely check out. Speaking of your book, could you please remind everyone one last time, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Thank you so much for asking. Amazon.com is where you can purchase a book online. And to contact me, you can email me at csnyder878@gmail.com.
Thank you, Corinne. I appreciate you again being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone.